Here we are in the Fortress of Winds. You know, I thought a place by this name would be a little less dusty than it actually is, but here we are anyway. And apparently Eslo had nothing to say until this specific room, and what, traps in a dungeon? No way. Why would you ever think that? I mean, it's not like the last two dungeons had any traps. So Fortress of Winds probably isn't my favorite dungeon, but it is up there, and that's partially because there are 3 items for us to work with here. The first, of course, being the Pegasus boots we got back from Hyrule Town, the bow we just got from Castor Wilds, and of course the dungeon item we're going to be getting fairly soon. Probably like midway through the dungeon, actually. But either way, I do like it when we actually get to use items in a Zelda dungeon, so even if this dungeon were to just use items we just got, there'd still be a lot to choose from here, so, you know, I'm A-okay with that. You know, I haven't really been talking about the music very much, and that's because I'm not always the biggest fan of Zelda music. It's not that it's bad, it's just usually not amazing to me. One thing I do like is that each dungeon does get its own unique theme, and that's pretty cool. Personally, I would have preferred having unique overworld themes, because through the entire game we just get, you know, the usual overworld theme from the original Legend of Zelda, but, you know, I kind of would have preferred that just because dungeon themes are alright, but usually I can't say much about them outside of their atmospheric. Usually they're not much more than that, they're usually not too terribly catchy or anything. But overworld themes, you know, they tend to stick out more since they can also be atmospheric, and you know, they're usually a bit more upbeat, or, you know, something other than, you know, just sort of this dangerous sort of ominous mood that it's trying to set. But that being said, this is a good song. Again, probably not one of my favorites. I keep thinking, what's my favorite dungeon? And then like, oh yeah, the second to last one. So it'll still be a little while before we actually see what my favorite dungeon is. I do actually like this placement for the Minish portal there, because first things first, it means we don't have to backtrack when we actually activate that Armos, and second off, if you are observant, first I want to break these skulls. See, I got a few rupees, it was worth it. But anyway, if you were observant, there is actually a little hole down there that we need to turn into a Minish to access. So why don't we go do that? Undoubtedly, there'll be some sort of good item for our troubles, right? Well, certainly not this key at the moment. We can't pick that up. It's just too heavy. But yes, indeed, we get a piece of a heart, and that's very nice. I think that's the only one in this dungeon. In fact, I think there was only one piece of heart in the previous dungeon, right? If that... I think that the first dungeon is one of the only ones with 2 pieces of heart, and wow, that was poorly timed on my part. But I think that's the case. I don't really remember the pieces of heart off the top of my head. But nonetheless, we have that key, but that's not all the keys we can get at the moment. Let's go to the left room rather than the center room, so we can get the key on the other side of the dungeon. Because otherwise we can only make it so far, of course. So these guys really aren't too terribly difficult. I believe these are, what are they called? Are these Stolfos? Forget if they're Stolfos. Yeah, they're Stolfos, because there aren't really any other skeleton enemies in this game, I think. But they're pretty easy. They try to jump on you, and they can be a bit tricky to hit. Not really to dodge unless there are a lot of them. Like now, for example. But they're slow enough where it shouldn't be too bad. It's just mostly dodging, or they're dodging rather, that's fairly annoying about them. And wow, that room was kind of pointless. And don't you think you're fooling me like, yeah, that's right, I saw you coming. Didn't think I'd notice you, huh? And that is actually kind of clever, because there's another like right here. And I swear that should have dodged it. But anyway, if you forgot that likes could disguise themselves as rupees, well, there was a warning back there that was only a green rupee, so it wouldn't really drain that many rupees from you. And of course, if you forgot at that point, well, too bad, you get red rupee liked. Which isn't pleasant at all. And have I mentioned that there are rupee-less likes that try to steal your shield? Just in case I haven't, well, there you go. So this room is just a timing puzzle for the bow, nothing too terribly tricky. You do have to hit them within a time. Not all of them, just the ones that open the door. See, I don't think I hit that. Yeah, I completely missed and took way too much time in general. Basically, you just wanted to hit the eyes just as these platforms start moving. That way you have plenty of time to hit the other eye. Simple enough, right? And of course we have Igor statues, but these guys are closing their eyes. They're playing it smart. They don't want to die. But it's easy enough to get them to wake up, just like that. And now we have 2 Igor statues to deal with, but it's really not a problem since they're so slow-moving. And really, the only thing that can get you hurt by these guys is impatience. I mean, it hurts me all the time. And from this, we get... I've got the compass again. Man, I guess I was incorrect when I said that you usually get the map first, but I swear you do. That's what happens in most games, right? I'm not wrong about that, right? Who knows? Well, somebody probably knows, but either way, that doesn't matter too much. We know where items are now. Eventually we'll get a map and we'll have the dungeon layout. Oh, I actually like this puzzle. This one's kind of neat. So, we have some block pushing to do, right? Looks simple. Simple enough. We got 1 pad, so well, let's just push this. Easy to figure out that we have to go vertically rather than horizontally. But when we move this block... Uh-oh, there's no way to actually move this over without it getting in the way. So what do? We reposition ourselves, of course. It's not really a difficult puzzle, but I think it's kind of creative. I rather like it. Oh, and one thing I completely forgot to mention before is, because you share the cancel button with the roll button, you can't actually roll when you have your clones out, which kinda sucks, but I suppose that would break a few things, since many of the clone puzzles are kinda time-based, so I suppose I understand why you can't roll, but it's still kind of annoying. Especially if you forget that you can't roll, and then you try to roll, and then you just screw yourself up. That happens to me a fair amount, actually. I don't think in any of these recordings that happened, but still, nonetheless, it does happen to me. So now that we got the keys from the surrounding areas, we can actually progress further into the dungeon, and hey, look at that, we got an item right there. I believe that's just a map and we can approach it from behind, right? And better take care of these Stalfos first, before we get anywhere. Okay, so yes, there are the stairs over there, but of course we have to take care of Igor statues first. Whoa! Can we do it? Oh man, I'm not too confident, so I'm gonna kill a second one, just in case. You never know. If we go over here, of course, this is the map. Not like we're going to get the dungeon items so easily, right? Of course not. But anyway, moving further on, I don't think they introduce a certain thing just yet, so we're free to just move on. So right here, we got a bit of a puzzle. Equip the Pegasus boots, pull this, and oh, look at that, a bridge extends, but it immediately retracts. And don't worry about it, Eslo. I was quick on the draw, so we made it a-okay. So yeah, that's a fairly easy puzzle, but timing can be a bit tough. Oh, but we got everybody's favorite enemies, Floor Masters. Don't get grabbed by these guys, because if you do, they take you back to the beginning of the dungeon. And in general, they're just a pain to deal with. Yeah, nobody really likes Floor Masters, or their counterparts, which we might be seeing in a little while. Read, we will be seeing them fairly soon. So there's no point to that puzzle, or the Minish portal just yet. I mean, it'll be part of a puzzle, but it's not a puzzle we have to solve. For now, we can just be big, and in fact, we have to be big, because there's nothing we can really do as a Minish over here. So this is also a pretty cool clone puzzle right here. So we can't just straight up press all these switches. So you have to arrange this in a bit of an odd pattern. Place these statues down, and you're going to want to do it pretty much like this. you can see what we have to do here, right? Then measure the distance, and we're good. By the way, you should usually lead the clone, rather you should be in front of whatever you're doing, just to make sure you don't actually push them into any sort of wall or anything that'll make them disappear. It's just better if you lead overall, plus you can take out any enemies if you're going through a new area that you haven't actually gone to yet, that might have a few enemies in it. Alright, so all that was just for that key door. And I believe, oh boy, not wall masters, floor masters. Those guys are on the floor, don't be silly self. Ooh, jeez. Don't worry, I won't be caught by these guys, because if I do, that would just be a huge waste of time. And if there's a huge waste of time in recording, well, that recording's gonna be scrapped. And, oh, did you notice that? There's a little skull over there. Well, rather a big skull. There's a skull pattern on the floor. And we're actually going to lead down and do this other door for the time being. To be completely honest, I know I just said there wouldn't be a huge waste of time in recordings, but, I don't exactly do the most efficient route through this dungeon, to be completely honest. I do apologize for that, but it's not a huge deal. It's not going to take too much more time, I swear. I'm not doing a huge waste of time or anything. And anyway, here are the Wall Masters, the guys that terrify most people because they come out of nowhere from the ceiling, despite the fact that they are called Wall Masters. That's due to the fact that the original Legend of Zelda had enemies that came out of the wall, and as such, they were called Wall Masters. But they don't really come out of the wall here, and they didn't get renamed to Ceiling Masters or anything. Enough about that, though. Before we continue on with Wall Masters, we've got another Dark Nuts. I believe the pattern does mean that they're a bit tougher. Actually, no, I think I'm thinking of the wrong type of Dark Nuts. Actually, yeah, I think this one looks pretty similar to the one we fought earlier. That one was just sort of a greenish color, if I'm correct. These guys have a bit more of a red outline, though, so they're not too tough. So it's pretty much the same battle as before, so you got some... Excuse me? You got some practice in earlier, but this time around, yeah, they're no problem. Well, okay, they are a problem, actually. They're still a bit tough to defeat, but you should be a bit more used to it by now. Easy puzzle here, just move along with spike traps. Don't try to go backwards through this area or anything. It's really not too tough, and it's not difficult to figure out. But what was difficult to figure out for me when I was a kid was this right here. Notice something obvious? I used to get lost here a lot because I always forgot about this bombable wall. It's not tough to figure out if you're observant, but when I was a kid, yeah, it was definitely a thing that threw me off. But for that, we get the dungeon item, which are the mole mitts. The mole mitts are very fun items to use, because we can just dig our way through walls like this, or we can dig along the ground to get items. I'm not going to do too much of that, though, because RNG doesn't really like me when it comes to that, so I don't usually dig stuff up from the ground. But of course, it's going to help us dig our way through the dirt here, so it's definitely a welcome item. It's not really too tricky, though, in terms of puzzles or anything to actually use the mole mitts. It's usually just progressing through an area rather than figuring things out. So now we're actually going to go back on this path, and wow, did I seriously screw that up? Got it perfectly the first time and didn't the second and third times. Wow, go me, that's a stellar performance there. Why didn't I scrap this recording, considering I took an inefficient route and screwed that up twice? I have no clue, but now I'm actually going to transform into a Minish. And we actually have a bit of a different challenge here. As long as you avoid the ropes, you should just be fine. They don't charge at you when you're a Minish, since more than likely they can't actually see you. But here you definitely need to stay in between those spiky rolling pins or whatever they are. Because those holes right there do help you avoid these traps when you're big, but when you're a Minish-sized, well, they are basically bottomless pits. I mean, you can see the bottom, but technically speaking they are bottomless since you'll fall into them and then just appear wherever. Basically in a nearby safe location anyway. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, as I said before, moments aren't really used for puzzles, but I guess technically speaking this could kind of be a puzzle? I mean, you can see sparks, and they're surrounded by dirt, so as long as you don't dig up the dirt around them, you won't release a trap, so it's really not anything difficult to avoid, but hey, I guess technically speaking it could be a puzzle, maybe. Moments are usually used for visual puzzles more than anything else, which really aren't that difficult to figure out. And thankfully the floor masters don't notice you when you're small either, which is good because then they'd be a pain. You do not want to be small and avoid these guys. Well, it's fairly easy to do so since they don't come right after you, so it's theoretically speaking, basically. And more of these. Yeah, now we have a whole lot of these. We also have moldorms to take care of, but they really aren't a problem. A bit erratic, and they move pretty quickly, but all in all, they're not too bad, though. They do take a lot of hits, though. That is one thing. Despite our slightly upgraded sword, they do take a while to kill, and wow! Got a green rupee, or a big green rupee, rather, so that's a pretty good reward. What about that pot over there? Does that have anything good? It only has a single mysterious shell, so that's not terribly useful. Again, I'm going to be doing all that stuff off-screen, but in the meantime, I still have to pay attention to how many mysterious shells I actually have. Gotta make sure I don't have too many or too few. I'm just gonna remind you of that periodically, since I'm not going to be showing figurine collecting. And oh, hey, look at that! There's another skull tile over here. So if you were paying attention, you want to go on the right side, otherwise you won't actually get the big key. You'll go on the wrong side. So that's kind of a neat puzzle, you know. You may or may not notice the fact that the tiles form a skull, and then you go up on the higher floor and see, oh hey, there's also a skull here. I better go to the right. Then again, in general, it's kind of obvious that you need to go to the right just because, you know, even if you don't notice the fact that it's a skull, you still kind of notice the fact that there's a big chest on the right side of that area, so it's kind of obvious, and oh, look at that, the chest disappears. I wonder what you're going to have to do here. Maybe move a pillar on top of that switch? Maybe. That could be it. I don't know. This is a pretty difficult puzzle, guys. And here we get a blue Kinstone piece. Well, it's not like I was expecting anything amazing considering the puzzle, but whatever, we actually have quite a few of those by this point. And we're actually at the boss door, but like I said before, I chose a bit of an inefficient route, so well, then again, I would have had to travel a little bit of a distance in order to get to these rooms anyway. But I guess I have some sort of excuse since I went through the portal, and hey, I kinda need health anyway, so I might as well go get items and then get health, and then I'm perfect and ready for the boss. So we got a red Kinstone piece here. Gotta be careful to Spark here, because he's in a fairly bad spot, and apparently... well, that went so very well. That was absolutely brilliant. Just dig up the spot right as he comes by. And I don't... is that everything on this side? I think it is, so let's just jump right back down. We've got a handy little drop point right here. And dig up a few more treasures. None of this is, of course, useful. As I said before, we already got the only piece of heart in the dungeon, so this is just for little things. Like rupees, which hopefully you two also have a big wallet by this point. I mean, it is fairly easy to get all the wallet upgrades, which is a good thing, because it's just so easy to max out on money. As I have shown before, I think I'm maxed out on pretty much every wallet, and oh boy, an ambush room! We get an early introduction to Wizrobes and also lanterns that try to kill us with projectiles for some reason. So those Wizrobes aren't too bad. In general, in this game, they're not too bad to handle. Though, generally they are everybody's least favorite enemies, or among some of them. They're annoying in Zelda 1 and also for swords, both of which they're used in very annoying manners. But that's enough about Wizrobes. They're dead and we're at the boss. So, this guy might look a little bit familiar, right? If you've played Zelda Wind Waker, this boss design is pretty similar to a boss in Wind Waker. I mean, in general, the whole hand aesthetic is done by a lot of Zelda bosses, and really a lot of Nintendo and just video games period. It's a very popular design, but in Nintendo games in particular, big heads, giant hands that you have to hit, yeah, they're pretty common. But the weakness is fairly obvious here. You have to hit the eyes within the hands, and you should be able to destroy the eyes within the hands within a single round. Then a hill drop, but it's not like we just have to use the bow here. Oh wait, not just yet. Here we just have to destroy this little brain pillar thingamajig, and once you do that, he'll bring you out, and you have to start another cycle. But of course, that was just to introduce the fact that there are different looking brain pillars that you have to destroy within his head. Now the real fight begins. Just to make note, I believe he can grab you with that hand attack, you know, the little sweep that he did. I only got nicked by it, so I only took normal damage, but yeah, that attack I believe he can grab you, so you want to avoid that, otherwise you'll take some pretty big damage. Alright, now that we've done that, once we Minish up and enter his head, now we have to use the moments to find his actual weakness. You can, of course, notice it because there's that little ring around it, so this is what we have to hit. Hey, I can leave of my own accord, thank you very much. Just to note, if you take too long within his head, that thing will just come out and take you out anyway, so you'll have to repeat the cycle and, well, you won't get a hit on him, so yeah, you definitely want to find that pillar as soon as you can, otherwise this battle's going to take a lot longer than it really should. It's an easy battle. A fun one though, I do have to say. I do kinda wish you had more item slots just so you didn't have to switch items like this, but it's really not too bad. You don't have to switch them that constantly or anything. Just once you transition inside his head, and what do you know, the brain pillar's right here. Easy enough to find, and he's done for. That's all taken care of, and we get... Oh, the element didn't fall down from the ceiling. Well, I guess it must be in the next room, then. At least we get our heart container. So, oh, this is a nice little sanctuary spot. It's so very peaceful. But I'm not seeing the element here. What gives? The Tribe of Winds is a giant stone tablet? Didn't see that one coming. Wait, together with the great winds. Did they take the element with them? Oh, those jerks. So we could have gotten the third element here and now, but unfortunately, they took it with them, and now we don't really know where to find them. At the very least, though, we do get the Ocarina of Wind, which is a very helpful item. So, since the element's not here, there's really nothing else for us to do for the time being. So, since we have the Ocarina of Wind and we're outside of a dungeon, why don't we test out our new item? So, next time on The Legend of Zelda, we do some item hunting, and of course, some Kinstone Fusions.